January 15th, 1947, 10:07 a.m., Leimert Park, Los Angeles. A woman is pushing a stroller through a quiet neighborhood. Morning errands, ordinary Tuesday. Then she stops. In the weeds off the sidewalk, something white, something that shouldn't be there. She looks closer, then she runs. By the time LAPD arrived, the scene had already defied explanation. A young woman, 22 years old, laid out in the vacant lot with surgical precision. Her body had been completely drained of blood, scrubbed clean, posed deliberately, arms above her head, positioned at a precise angle, facing the street. Whoever left her there wanted her to be found. The medical examiner noted something that stopped every investigator cold. The cuts were professional, precise. The dissection showed knowledge of human anatomy that pointed to surgical or medical training. This wasn't rage. This wasn't chaos. This was calculated. Her name was Elizabeth Short, born July 29, 1924, Boston, Massachusetts, 22 years old, an aspiring actress who had come to Los Angeles chasing a dream that never arrived. The press gave her a different name, the Black Dahlia, and the case that followed would become the most famous unsolved murder in American history. Look at the timeline. This is where the investigation starts. Elizabeth Short arrived in Los Angeles in July 1946, 6 months before her death. She worked as a waitress. She moved between rented rooms and the couches of people she barely knew. She was described by everyone who met her as charming, beautiful, and deeply uncertain about her future. She had no permanent address, no steady income, no one person who knew her complete story. This matters, because it means the weeks before her death are full of gaps. People who saw her briefly, names she gave that may not have been real, places she stayed that no one fully documented. January 9, 1947, 6 days before her body was found. A married salesman named Robert Manley drove Elizabeth Short from San Diego to Los Angeles. He dropped her at the Biltmore Hotel on South Grand Avenue at approximately 6:30 p.m. She told Manley she was meeting her sister, who was visiting from Boston. Her sister was not in Los Angeles. There was no reservation. The story was false. She walked into that lobby alone, and then she waited. Lobby staff and other guests later confirmed what followed. For the next 3.5 hours, Elizabeth Short paced the grand lobby of the Biltmore. She checked the concierge desk repeatedly for messages. She used the lobby telephone. She sat. She stood. She checked again. Whatever she was waiting for, whoever she was waiting for, never appeared at that desk. At approximately 10 p.m., the hotel doorman watched her walk out through the main doors onto the dark streets of Los Angeles. She was never seen alive again. 6 days, an unknown location, an unknown person. The medical examiner confirmed she had been held somewhere for at least 2 days before her body was transported to Leimert Park. The lot was a disposal site, not the murder location. Whoever did this had somewhere private, somewhere with running water, somewhere they felt completely safe. LAPD launched what would become the largest homicide investigation in the department's history at that point. Over 750 suspects were interviewed in the first year alone. Not one was ever charged. January 21st, 1947, 6 days after the body was found. The editor of the Los Angeles Examiner received a phone call. The caller claimed to be the killer. He was calm. He congratulated the newspaper on its coverage. He said he would turn himself in. Soon, but not yet. Then he hung up. Days later, the Examiner received a package. Inside, Elizabeth Short's birth certificate, her social security card, her photographs, a claim check from a luggage locker at a Los Angeles bus station. The items had been washed in gasoline, every fingerprint destroyed. Investigators retrieved the luggage. Inside, more of her belongings, her address book, her papers. One name had been torn out. Think about what that means. Someone went through her address book and removed exactly 1 page before sending everything to the press. They weren't hiding from the investigation. They were directing it, controlling what investigators saw and what they didn't. This wasn't a panicked killer covering their tracks. This was someone who understood how investigations worked. Over the following months, more than 150 people confessed to the Black Dahlia murder. Every single confession was proven false. The real killer never confessed, never slipped, never left a traceable thread. They simply disappeared back into Los Angeles. Here is where the case fractures into competing theories and where it has remained fractured for 77 years. LAPD focused early on men with medical or surgical knowledge. The precision of the crime required skill. They served warrants. They interviewed surgeons, doctors, medical students. Nothing conclusive emerged. Robert Manley, the last confirmed person to see her alive, was investigated extensively. He passed 2 polygraph tests and was eventually cleared. But cleared doesn't mean innocent. Polygraphs aren't evidence. They're indicators. He remained a person of interest for years. Then there is the theory that has consumed true crime researchers for decades. George Hodel, a physician, brilliant, connected, known to LAPD for other reasons entirely. His own son, Steve Hodel, a former LAPD detective, spent 25 years building a case against his father. He published his findings. He named his own father as the Black Dahlia killer. The evidence Steve Hodel assembled is circumstantial but extensive. His father had surgical skill. His father knew Los Angeles intimately. His father had connections that could have made evidence disappear. But in 2026, author William J. Mann reviewed the evidence and argued there was no convincing proof George Hodel had ever even met Elizabeth Short. The timelines, Mann argued, don't overlap the way Hodel's supporters claim. 77 years later, investigators, authors, and detectives are still arguing about a man who died without confessing to anything. 750 suspects, 0 charges. Set aside the suspects for a moment. Come back to the physical evidence. The body was drained of blood, completely. That requires time, equipment, and space. You cannot do that in a car. You cannot do that in a hotel room. Whoever killed Elizabeth Short had access to a private location with running water and enough time to work undisturbed for at least 2 days. The cuts showed medical knowledge. The positioning of the body showed deliberate staging. The gasoline-washed package showed awareness of forensic evidence. This person had planned this, possibly for a long time. LAPD's lead investigator, Captain Jack Donahue, told the press he believed the murder occurred in a remote building or shack on the outskirts of Los Angeles. The body was transported into the city afterward. That means somewhere, in 1947 Los Angeles, there was a location where this happened. A location that was never found, never connected to a suspect, never identified. It may still exist. The case generated front-page coverage for 35 consecutive days. It was the story that wouldn't stop. And then, it did stop. Not because it was solved, because new stories replaced it, because the investigation ran into a stone wall. The LAPD file on the Black Dahlia murder runs to thousands of pages. Much of it has never been made public. The case remains technically open. An open case, 77 years old. Here is what we know for certain. Elizabeth Short was 22 years old. She was last seen alive on January 9, 1947. Her body was found January 15th. She had been held for at least 2 days before being transported to Leimert Park. The killer had medical knowledge. The killer had access to a private location. The killer was aware enough of forensic investigation to destroy fingerprint evidence before sending her belongings to the press. Here is what we don't know. Where she was held. Who held her? Which of the 750 suspects, if any, was actually responsible? What was on the page torn from her address book? Who called the examiner and why? And the question that has never been answered in 77 years of investigation: why was she posed that way? Laid out with that precision, facing the street, arms above her head, positioned to be found by the first person who walked past. The killer didn't hide her. They displayed her. That was a message. To someone. About something. No one has ever decoded it. The Black Dahlia case is still officially open at the Los Angeles Police Department. The last person who knew what happened that week in January 1947 has almost certainly died without telling anyone. Elizabeth Short was 22 years old. She came to Los Angeles with a suitcase and a dream, and 6 months later, she was gone. It has now been 79 years since she walked out of the Biltmore and into the dark. Nearly 8 decades later, the files remain open, the leads have grown cold, and the neon lights of Los Angeles continue to shield a killer whose identity time has entirely erased. The vault remains open.